You can be completely normal weight and still have a liver quietly drowning in fat. Not the fat you can see, not the fat you can pinch around your waist, the fat building up inside the organ that filters your blood every single day. And here is the part that should genuinely concern you. This type of fat shows almost no symptoms until the damage is already significant. You feel fine, your energy seems normal, and inside, your liver is slowly losing its ability to do its job. Right now, 1 in 4 adults has some degree of fatty liver disease without knowing it. But here's where the story gets interesting. A landmark study published in Cell Metabolism tracked nearly 200 people with fatty liver disease. One group ate a specific type of carbohydrate every single day. Just one change. Nothing else in their diet was different. After 4 months, that group showed a measurable drop in liver fat. Their liver enzymes improved. And most strikingly, this happened in many cases without any weight loss at all. The carbohydrate they used is called resistant starch, and I'm going to show you exactly what the research found, why this carb behaves nothing like ordinary starch, and how I personally eat it every single week without buying a single tub of powder. Stay until the end, because the kitchen trick I use costs nothing, and most people have never heard of it. Let me explain why this matters so much. There are two types of fat that do far more damage than the fat you can see on your body. The first is visceral fat, the deep fat wrapped around your organs inside your abdomen. The second is fat that builds up directly inside your liver. Both of these significantly raise your risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and a long list of conditions that show up in emergency rooms every single day. Here is the part that makes liver fat particularly dangerous. Your liver does not have pain receptors the way other organs do. It can be quietly accumulating fat for years before you ever feel anything wrong. By the time most people get diagnosed, the damage has already been building silently. So the question becomes obvious. What can actually reverse this process before it becomes irreversible? That brings us to resistant starch. Here is where most people get confused, and understandably so. The name itself is misleading. Resistant starch lives inside familiar foods, like beans, oats, and potatoes that have cooled down. But it does not behave like ordinary starch at all. Let me explain the difference. Most of the starch you eat in bread, rice, pasta, and potatoes breaks down rapidly in your small intestine. It turns into glucose almost immediately, which floods into your bloodstream and causes a sharp blood sugar spike. Resistant starch does something completely different. It resists that digestion process entirely. It passes through your small intestine almost untouched. When it reaches your large intestine, something remarkable happens. Your gut bacteria treat it as food and begin fermenting it. During that fermentation, your bacteria produce powerful compounds called short-chain fatty acids. The most important one is called butyrate. This is exactly the same process that happens with regular fiber, which is why resistant starch technically counts as a type of fiber, even though it started life looking like an ordinary starch. Instead of spiking your blood sugar and feeding fat storage, resistant starch feeds the bacteria that keep your gut, your metabolism, and your liver functioning properly. The evidence behind this is stronger than most people realize. In a 4-month randomized controlled trial published in Cell Metabolism in 2023, almost 200 people with fatty liver disease were divided into two groups. One group received resistant starch. The other group received an ordinary starch that looked completely identical. Both groups consumed around 40 grams per day. The group taking resistant starch showed a real, measurable drop in fat stored inside their liver. Their liver enzymes improved significantly. And here is the detail that surprised even the researchers. Much of that benefit happened without any weight loss whatsoever. The researchers traced this back to changes in gut bacteria communicating with the liver through what is called the gut-liver axis. But the story does not stop at the liver. In a separate controlled trial, several weeks of resistant starch significantly reduced visceral fat, the deep fat wrapped around your organs that drives so much metabolic disease. Same intervention, two different dangerous fat depots responding at the same time. Let me explain what happens when you eat regular starch, because understanding the contrast makes everything click. When you eat white bread, white rice, pasta, or cereal, the starch has been stripped of its natural fiber and structure. It breaks down almost instantly into glucose. That sends your blood sugar up sharply. Your body releases a large surge of insulin to deal with it. Here is the critical thing to understand about insulin. Insulin is a storage hormone, and when it surges, it tells your body to store fat, specifically in your liver and around your organs. Resistant starch does close to the opposite. It barely raises your blood sugar. It requires far less insulin, and it sends fuel to your gut bacteria instead of your fat stores. Now, the cleanest way to avoid carbohydrate blood sugar spikes entirely would be to give up carbohydrates altogether. That is what we call the ketogenic diet. But here is the honest truth about that approach. Most people cannot sustain it for life. It is restrictive, and frankly, it is not enjoyable for most people long term. The best dietary approach is one you can sustain easily and enjoy for the next 50 years. My personal approach is simpler. I eat carbohydrates less frequently than most people, and when I do eat them, I try to make them resistant starches whenever possible. Here is where this becomes genuinely useful, because you can create resistant starch in your own kitchen with almost no effort. When you cook starchy foods like potatoes, rice, or pasta, and then cool them in the refrigerator, something interesting happens at the molecular level. Some of the digestible starch recrystallizes into resistant starch through a process called retrogradation. This means a cold potato salad, leftover rice, or pasta that has gone cold in the fridge contains more resistant starch than the same food eaten hot. The same trick works with bread. Freezing bread and then toasting it directly from frozen has been shown in multiple studies to lower the blood sugar response compared with eating fresh bread. The freezing and toasting process changes the starch structure in a similar way. Here is exactly what I do in my own kitchen. Whenever we buy a large-seeded fermented sourdough loaf, we chop it up immediately and freeze it. Every single time we want toast or a side of bread, we either toast it directly from frozen or defrost it first. I actually tested this myself. I wore a continuous blood sugar monitor for an entire month specifically to check this. My blood sugar response was consistently lower when the bread had been frozen first. A simple habit like batch cooking rice and potatoes, keeping them refrigerated, and freezing your bread loaf turns everyday staples into something that protects your liver instead of working against it. You are obviously not going to do this for every single meal, but on the occasions when you do eat carbohydrates, choosing the resistant version makes a measurable difference. Beyond cooling and freezing, there are foods that come naturally loaded with resistant starch without any preparation at all. Beans, lentils, and chickpeas are among the very best sources available. This is one more reason why the longest living populations in the world eat these foods so frequently. Slightly underripe green bananas are also rich in resistant starch. They actually lose this benefit as they ripen and become sweeter. Properly intact whole grains, like oats and barley, contain resistant starch naturally, and oats prepared the night before, as overnight oats, give you even more of it. Cashews specifically add additional resistant starch as well. If you can source resistant starch from these natural foods first, that is always the better choice over preparing rice or potatoes in the cold method. But when you do eat rice, potatoes, or pasta, choosing the cold or reheated version remains significantly better than eating it fresh and hot. This brings me back to that 40-gram figure mentioned at the beginning, because there is an important point to clarify here. In the research study, scientists used a powder specifically because it is easier to measure precisely in a controlled trial. The point of this video is not to send you chasing a specific number every single day. The real lesson from this research is much simpler. Resistant starch is significantly better for you than ordinary starch, and ordinary starch is significantly better than refined carbohydrates. So, if you are going to eat carbohydrates, the practical approach looks like this. First, try to reduce the overall amount you eat over time, because we know refined carbs spike blood sugar repeatedly throughout the day. Second, when you do eat carbohydrates, source them from whole foods or resistant versions you have prepared yourself, whether that means freezing your bread or cooking your rice and potatoes the night before. None of this needs to be followed perfectly or dogmatically. These are small, repeatable habits that compound over time into a meaningful difference in your insulin response and your blood sugar control. Here is what I want you to take away from everything we just covered. So much of modern disease, the heart attacks, the strokes, certain cancers, even cognitive decline, traces back to the frequency and intensity of your blood sugar spikes. You do not need to eliminate carbohydrates from your life forever. You simply need to reduce how often you eat the refined versions and increase how often you choose the resistant versions. Whether that comes from beans and lentils, slightly green bananas, or a cold potato you prepared the night before. Your liver is working silently every single day to keep you healthy. This is one of the simplest ways to work with it instead of against it. If you found this useful, let me know in the comments what surprised you most. I read every single one. I will see you in the next video.